to talk about managing the job search process. Like I said before, there's no right or wrong way to do this, but I want to give you some guidelines because sometimes this process can feel overwhelming. We're trying to break it down into these 6 sessions, and by doing this in the midway point, some of these things we've already started working on, and some of these things I'm going to talk about we will be discussing in future sessions. But know that these are guidelines. There is not a right or a wrong way to do it. I also recognize that many of you are juggling existing jobs. Maybe they were jobs you had in college. Maybe you have a short-term internship. Maybe you have some volunteer work. So you're juggling a lot of different things. And so we want to identify ways for you to integrate this job search process with your existing life. Some of you might be taking a vacation, all those kinds of things. So again, these are guidelines. This is not a black and white system. And you will receive a handout afterwards that'll go into a little bit more detail. But hopefully, as I talk through some of these things, it'll give you some structure and some thoughts about how you want to go about this. A lot of times when I meet with recent graduates, it's one of the things that it kind of is the beginning of your plan, which we'll talk at the very end. You'll be sharing your plans with us. This can be a really helpful tool. Sometimes people need to show their parents how they're making plans, and I have worked with people that have said, look, these are the steps I'm taking, this is how I'm organizing myself, this is how much time I'm taking, and it just kind of gives everybody, helps to manage a lot of those expectations. So I'm going to share some slides with you and talk through some of them with you, have a little activity at the end, and then we can go to Q&A and again tailor more of what you're interested in doing to what we're doing here. Okay, so I'm going to do a little clunky transition here. Hope that looks good.
You are good, Linda.
Okay, thank you for the feedback. Okay, so let's start talking about this. Oops, went too far. Well, we're going to get right to here anyway. So first of all, kind of what is managing this job search process? I'm actually going to break it down into 4 steps. They're not steps that you have to go sequentially in, but it is kind of a way to think through each piece of the puzzle that you need to complete. And then I'm going to, towards the end, talk a little bit about how you might choose to manage your time. Again, these are suggestions, and you have to work it into kind of your style because everyone has, a different style to how they work. So step 1, this is really what we talked about, that Courtney talked about in the first session, which is really having a good sense of knowing yourself. So hopefully you spent some time thinking about your strengths, thinking about your skills, what's important to you, what are your values so that those match up well with the organizations where you're looking, and what are your interests. I really don't think that we are all out to find the perfect career and the perfect job first. I think if you manage it in a way to think about, okay, what do I want to do in the next couple years that does fit with my strengths, my skills, my values, and interests. I don't know if we've said it earlier, but a lot of times people average 8 different careers in a lifetime. So we're just trying to get that first step. And the more that you can know yourself and what you're interested in, hopefully that'll get you to that next step. And hopefully you saw some of those additional materials, other skills. There's lots of tools to help you continue to identify these. And these, again, are going to change over the course of your career. So again, our hope is that as you go through this job search process, and you understand yourself better, that you will be using these tools for your entire career. You're so smart and fortunate to be focused on doing this right now, and you should all give yourselves a pat on the back for that, because what you're going through in these 3 weeks really will give you the tools and resources to move you forward throughout your career. So please keep that in mind as you go through this. Another thing to start looking at is what job titles and fields of interest sound interesting to you. You can do that by just looking. You don't have to apply to things, but just looking at different job titles, looking at things on Indeed, just spending some time. What sounds interesting to me? What titles make sense? Where do they say, I have the right level of experience? One of the questions I get a lot of is, should I even be looking at jobs if I don't have all of the qualifications? I typically recommend that if you qualify for 75% of what you're reading, give it a shot, because there's plenty of people that are applying that have maybe 25%, and nobody can meet those job descriptions perfectly. So give that a shot. And then there's not just one path for you. Many times when I sit down one-on-one with people, they feel like they're very scattered, and yet if I kind of ask them a lot of probing questions, you can typically break it down to 2 or 3 different paths. So think about what those different paths might be, and that will help you manage your expectations and manage your process without feeling like you're applying to a lot of things. So whether that's a specific industry that you're focused on, or utilizing a specific, set of skills. Focus on just keeping it to about 2 or 3, and then you won't feel, hopefully, as overwhelmed. So once you start to feel like, okay, I'm having a better sense of what direction I should go, I have a sense of maybe some jobs to look at, some different careers and organizations, this is when you really get to start to do some of your research, the step 2. And I like to really focus on reversing the search process. A lot of times people initially start by just looking online for jobs. I like the reverse of that. So focus on what organizations and companies are of interest to me. What career fields are of interest to me. And by doing that, there's lots of ways to discover that research, and we'll talk about that. But it's much better to create that kind of a list. So maybe you're reading your local daily newspaper. Most regions have a business journal. Start to get a sense of what organizations sound interesting. As you start to probe on your LinkedIn and join different groups, you might see where different companies are represented. But I recommend, again, I'm here to try to help you keep this very manageable, maybe 3 geographic areas. And I think most of you have indicated that in the LinkedIn profile, that either you're right around there. So a lot of you have already accomplished that, whether it's Seattle, Portland, San Francisco. But that will help, again, keep your focus more narrow and not feeling like, again, you're applying to the world. And then I usually recommend starting with 10 potential employers. For some of you, you may want to have it be 30, but 10 at a minimum, so that becomes your focus and where you want to put most of your energy. And there's lots of ways, again, to go through some of that research and those opportunities. But again, 3 geographic areas, 10 potential employers, after you've done some research on different organizations, nonprofits, companies in your area or the areas that you're looking in. And again, a variety of entry-level fields. And again, keep that scope small, around 2 to 3 as well. And that, again, will help to keep you manageable. So spend time doing that. So what are your resources and how do you actually prepare for that? So many of you are probably familiar with .Connect. That's the Career Center's website. You'll find lots of resources on there. One of the things that I know people get so overwhelmed with is there's so many different ways to write about resumes or cover letters or whatever. If you utilize the Career Center website, we have basically gone through what we think are best practices, and you'll find a lot of resources on the website to really synthesize what you see out there if you just Google resume and see all the different variations on that. It's also a good place to look for jobs. Not all the things that you're interested in will you find on .Connect, but again, it's a resource. You can keep your pulse on it. It's something to focus on. Other websites that people like are Indeed.com. You can do some great search functions within Indeed.com that people really like, and also Simply Hired. So you might, again, I don't want to give you too many because I'm here to talk about managing the job search process and managing your time. So I think it's better to keep these few and have them robust. And then I think you'll appreciate them much more. Social media is also a really great tool, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn. There's great, you can follow organizations, you can follow nonprofits. There's also, a lot of times I work with people that want inspiration on a daily basis to keep them motivated, to keep them going through this process. Some ones that I really like are the Daily Muse. They have great resources that I really appreciate and I value and I look to keep myself current. There's also something called Career Realism. I follow them on LinkedIn. You can follow them on Twitter as well. And again, great articles on prepping you before an interview, insight on resumes and cover letters, really, really helpful tool. And they're very prolific out there, so you can find a lot of content. On LinkedIn, I follow certain influencers, and as you connect with people on LinkedIn, you might want to see there's a category called influencers. Who are they following? Who are they inspired by? I just posted something to the LinkedIn group today. It's a little ahead of the interviewing, but it was all these top executives and some of these interesting questions that they ask candidates to really get a sense of them. And a lot of those people I noticed who ask interesting questions are people that I actually follow on LinkedIn. And then for the women in the group, I really like Levo League. It's L-E-V-O League. Again, great source of inspiration of fantastic young women making great strides that relate to your career. So social media can be a huge resource. Again, choose wisely, find out which ones fit for you, but it can really be a great motivator to keep you going through the process. Professional advisors, your career counselors, hopefully you will continue to use us. Just to reiterate, you have free services from the Career Center for a year post-graduation. You can continue to use us through your career development, but we do have to charge a small fee. But during this first year, really utilize us and run questions by us and see who else, other resources that we might be able to provide. Keep in mind, if you had close relationships with your professors, those can continue to be mentors and advisors. And one of the greatest resources are former employers, people that have supervised you, that have invested in you. I worked in the Career Center my senior year, and I stayed connected to my supervisor for many years. And as she moved up through the ranks, she was then eventually in a position to hire me for this position several years later. So you never know how those people will continue to influence you, to support you, and then possibly to even hire you. So do pay attention to who those advisors might be. They might even be friends of your parents who are in your field, or just someone that's really invested. I have a son that's in college, and he was looking in accounting, and he talked to a number of my friends who were accountants to see if that was a path that he wanted to take. So you never know where those resources might be. And fortunately, you're going to get your own professional advisor being a part of this group. So I do encourage you to utilize that opportunity and to make the most of it. Other things that are really important to prepare is a professional voicemail, email, and making sure that your social media is all nice and tidy. I can't tell you how many times I will call a voicemail box, return a call from somebody that's contacted me, and they haven't set up their voicemail box yet. So it's that automated one. Again, this goes back to what Courtney was talking about with a brand. You want to make sure that your voicemail box is set up, that it's very professional, and that you really check your voicemail. I have noticed that sometimes voicemail and email is not checked as often with millennials. It's not all the case, but it seems like they aren't checked on a regular basis. But when you're in this job search process, it's really important to stay on top of those and to be very responsive. So make sure you have a very professional voice, professional name. Your email, make sure that we would encourage you to transition from your U-Oregon email to a Gmail or another account, because unfortunately the University of Oregon doesn't have the bandwidth to support your emails for an indefinite period of time. So consider making that transition. Some of you maybe already have that, because you have to set up a lot of your accounts that way. Make sure that it's not a silly nickname. If you can, make it your first name and your last name. Sometimes you have to add some numbers if it's already taken. But it's much easier when you think about it for employers to find you, or mentors to find you, or anyone that you're trying to connect with, if they can just plug in your name. So make sure that you have a nice professional email address, because that's going to be all over your materials as well. And then again, I want to reiterate the importance of part of your preparation is to make sure that your social media is all cleaned up or with the very strict privacy settings on those, so that, again, you're coming across, you want to be you. I don't want you to pretend you're not somebody that you're not, but of course we don't want to have things that might misrepresent who we are. So make sure that you've cleaned those up as much as possible, because we do know that recruiters do check all of that. They'll go to LinkedIn first. 95% of them, I think Courtney gave you that statistic, will go to your LinkedIn first, but they'll also go and check you out on Facebook, especially if you're in a more casual environment. Sometimes they want to say, oh, is this person going to be fun to hang out with? So, but clean that up, make it represent you and who you want to come across. This next bullet, interview stories. Again, this is something that we haven't talked about yet. We'll be talking about it a week from today, but part of your preparation will be preparing your interview stories. If you want to get a jump on what we're going to be talking about next week, I usually recommend that people have up to 10 to 15 stories about their accomplishments and their experiences kind of in the bag, so that you can pull from those. So you can even start, working on preparing one of those a day, just reviewing your resume and saying, what am I really proud of? What have I accomplished? And you can start sketching those out and what that might entail. And that's all part of that preparation before you kind of dive right into it. Your wardrobe, you want to make sure that whatever your industry, you have appropriate clothing to wear. Every single industry is different and value different wardrobes differently. I recommend that you always dress one notch up when you're interviewing. So if it's a super casual advertising agency or it's an accounting firm, make sure, and if you are wondering, I always think the easiest thing to do is just to go and stop by the offices and see what people are wearing. So check that out. Make sure that you're ready for those opportunities, and that you're ready to start the job market feeling really well groomed, because that really does contribute to your confidence level and makes you feel good about taking those next steps. The 30-second spots. Well, we know there's always going to be opportunities where we might bump into somebody at the grocery store or at the park or at a concert. You never know when you're going to bump into somebody. So think about what you want that 30-second spot to be. You might hear it as elevator pitch, whatever that might be. But think about, what do I want to come across? We might talk about this a little bit more in the networking section. But again, what you're looking for, what you're interested in, and what you've accomplished, or some of the things you might want to think about, so that when you do bump into somebody, and I'm sure a lot of you as recent graduates are getting the question, so what are you going to do? You want to have that nailed. So again, you feel confident. And the more that you have that prepared and practiced, the more it comes off naturally. You don't want it to sound really stiff, but that takes practice for it not to feel stiff. So outline some of those thoughts on what that could be, so that if you do get caught by somebody, in an elevator, you're going to be ready for them, and I'm sure you will be. And then what about your documents? So that's what we talked about last week, making sure that your resume is solid, and we'll be helping you with that. I've really liked what I've already seen from the folks that I'm meeting with. So I think a lot of you you're really taking this seriously, which is great. That will definitely be to your benefit. The cover letter, do I have that me paragraph solid? Do I feel confident about that? Again, you might decide that you want to tweak it a little bit each week as you go along, because as I said in that presentation, things can always get better. And then portfolio. Some of you I know do have portfolios for your industry, making sure that your website is great. One thing that I've noticed that sometimes people do, for people that do have portfolios, if they don't have an opportunity to go through those materials with people, is to have what they call a leave behind. It can just be on an 8.5 by 11, but maybe it just has maybe 3 strong visual images on one side that represent your design work specifically, and maybe your resume on the other side. So something that you can leave with them that you feel like is your best work is something that I know other people like to have. The other thing that I don't have on this specific list is also thank you notes. One thing I recommend is if you have created an image for yourself on your resume and your cover letter and your portfolio, take that image with your name and create thank you notes. They can be the simple folded cards, but it's amazing how often when you send those notes to people that they keep them. They keep them on their desk, because we just don't get mail. Now, a lot of industry emails, thank you notes are fine, but if you are working on your documents and that's something that you think would suit your industry and your style and your brand, I encourage you to think about doing that. Okay, next step, strategies. Now, you know, you're hearing lots of different strategies and lots of ways to go about this. And it can be overwhelming. And again, my goal today is to try to simplify things so it isn't overwhelming. But we can't just use one strategy when looking for a job. We need to have a blend of what those strategies are. So, so you might want to just pick 3 or 4, or maybe you want to tackle them all. But again, I don't think it's necessary to do every single thing. So maybe one of your strategies is that you're really good online, and so you're going to be checking websites a lot that represent your industry. A lot of industries have job boards for their industry, like the Portland, the Public Relations Society of America, or Portland Ad Federation, or architects. So, you know, maybe that's a place that you want to look. I mentioned earlier the importance of reading the business journal in your area or the daily publication. So in Portland, for instance, it would be the Portland Business Journal and the Oregonian. I find out so many important things about companies that are coming into the area, that are negotiating for, you know, tax dollars so that they can have a larger pool of people, that Nike is hiring 500 people. So really pay attention to those business sections and create a rhythm where you're reading that. It's amazing how many things you find out about before anything's posted. That's where I get a lot of my knowledge about Portland industries and companies and where the growth is happening. Create a networking list, whether those are friends and family, former employers, start working that list. Informational interviews is my favorite strategy. You'll learn a little bit more about that on Thursday, but if you choose to go to the Career Center website and click on the Alumni tab, I have something called Alumni Perspectives, and hopefully it will give you inspiration. I know it does me. It makes me really, you know, happy when I read these stories. But most of these recent grads have come through this office and they have embraced the informational interview. And most of them have found jobs that they enjoy through that process. Either they find out about jobs before they're even posted, or they build connections and find out about companies that they didn't know about, or they attend events where they might meet somebody new. But informational interviews, I think it's got to be one of your #1 strategies. Identify organizations of interest. So there might be, you know, different professional organizations that you want to engage with, either attending the networking events or just even following them online, whether it's a local chamber of commerce or it's a specific industry, whether it's technology, whatever that might be. But start to find out, are there different organizations where you can attend different events and meet with people that way. So those are just some of the strategies. So pick those that you really suit your personality best and what makes you most comfortable. We're going to talk a little bit about creating a system to track this information, because the good and the bad is that once you start this process, you're gonna be flooded with information, and it's going to be exciting, but it's going to be important to really keep track of who you've spoken with and what you discuss and if they referred you to anybody else. So a system is going to be important, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The importance of following up on all of your leads and everything you've submitted, that you have to do that. If you've submitted something, don't wait for them to get back to you. Follow up in a couple of weeks. That will be really, really key. And then if you've submitted something, follow up on those as well. So whether it's an informational interview request or you've submitted to a job, follow up is key. In fact, when I've talked to a lot of people who have done informational interviews, which you're going to have the opportunity to do with a professional, and one of the biggest complaints they say is that they never heard from that person again. They met that person and they never heard from them again. People, once they've taken that time to invest in you or to interview you, they want to keep up to date on what's going on with you. So most people come from a place of, I don't want to bug them, I don't want to offend, which is really thoughtful. But just quick notes and follow-up leads can be really helpful. Maybe you find an article that might be of interest to them and you're like, hey, I was just thinking of you. But do find a way to periodically keep your contacts up to date. They really do appreciate that. And then, as I mentioned before, the importance of thank you notes. I really can't stress that enough. And you'd be surprised at how many people don't do it. In fact, there's a statistic that says 5% of people do not submit, or only 5% of people submit thank you notes. I mean, that's just amazing. And sometimes people have said to me, well, if it's just an informational interview, I don't have to send a thank you note, do I? Of course you do. They just gave you 30 minutes of their time. And again, you just have to write something simple, just, thanking them for their time, maybe a nugget that you got out of it, and the hope to stay connected in the future. So, but that step 4 is really, really critical. Okay, so how do you manage all of this? This is a lot. Don't you love my Big Ben Tower? I love London. Anyway, there's a lot to this time management. So, and there's lots of ways that you can do this. So, and there's a very detailed by like 5% here, 5% there in the materials that you're going to receive. So I'm not going to go into a ton of detail, but this is how you can kind of think about, what you want to do. So again, each of you is blending a lot of different things in your life. So I can't tell you that how many hours you should spend on something per week or the next week or the month. So you have to really determine that, but you need to do something. So maybe, you spend, whatever your percentage of hours are that you have to devote to the job search process. These are some recommendations on how you split up that time. And I do encourage you to do something every day. You'll feel good that you're doing something every day, and you know that you'll be moving forward and making progress. So preparation, attending this job search group you're going to be the most prepared of most people that are out there looking for a job. So spending 10% of your time on doing preparation and getting all your materials ready, those 4 steps that I just talked about is really important. Responding to postings. So I'm not a super big fan of just replying online. I know that people do get jobs that way, but I don't think you should spend most of your time doing that. I really only recommend 5%. And I say that because there's hundreds and hundreds of people that are applying to those jobs. And unless you're networking pre and post that submission, it's just going to go in a black hole. And I can't tell you how many people sit in the chair across from me and say, I've been applying. And that's where they're putting all of their time. They're putting almost 75% in their time of just writing cover letters and posting and hearing nothing. So I really want you to be proactive, which you're showing us by being a part of this group that you are, and spend a very small percentage of your time responding to postings. And only if, again, you feel like you meet 75% of the criteria and you're feeling really good about that process. Networking is key. I think this is where you need to spend most of your time. As you can see, 50% is what I'm recommending. So this can be anything from meeting with people one-on-one to sending emails out for introduction to attending events in your industry, but this is where you're going to get most of your opportunity. And one small note on networking, we are going to talk about it on Thursday, but even if you go to a networking event, if you don't come away from that event with a couple of contacts that you're going to follow up with for an informational interview, that can kind of be wasted energy. So go with the intent of making a couple of contacts at those events for future follow-up, but that connecting one-on-one with people, even though everything is so digital now, people still want to connect with people and figure out what that fit is. So please spend most of your time on that. Follow-up, I have 30%. That's a really high number, I know, but that's where most people do, because people forget about who they've met. They forgot who came and met with me. I think they'd be a really good fit for this job. Maybe the job wasn't posted when you met with them, but they're trying to remind themselves of, how do I know this person? So really, that's why I think having a system to track all of your conversations and who's interviewing you is super, super critical, because that's where you find out all of those opportunities, those missing pieces happens with the follow-up. And then the most important part is your rewards. I mean, I think it's really important to think of a system where on Fridays at 5 o'clock or Saturdays or maybe it's a Monday for you, but once a week, really recognize yourself for the work that you've put into it. It's really important through this process to stay positive. And if you're not rewarding yourself, being around your friends, connecting with people, you can really get into a negative slump. And I'm here to keep you boosted up, to make you feel positive, and rewarding yourself with, maybe it's a long run, maybe it's a hike, maybe it's a beer with friends, maybe it's coffee with a sister, whatever it is, but identify what is going to make you feel like, yeah, I did that. that is really important. That will keep you boosted and feeling really good about where you're spending your time. So how do we track this? So this is, I'd like you to start taking some notes and thinking about how you might create a spreadsheet. I'm not laying it out specifically here for you because everyone is doing something different, but maybe you have a column for organizations, then the contact name, their contact information. Maybe you have them on different sheets within a larger spreadsheet, but you want to be able to track briefly maybe what you talked about. You want to know if they referred you to anybody, because one of the most important ways that you can follow up with that original contact is to go back to them and say, thank you so much for this referral to this individual. This is what I learned from it. It made me even more excited about getting into this industry and being a part of your organization or an organization like yours. That's the easiest way to get to that point. So I really encourage you to create that type of a spreadsheet. Track when you talk to them. So maybe you decide when you meet with that person, they said I could follow up with them in a couple of weeks, or they said I could follow up with them, you know, in a month. So keep track of that system of how frequently you're following up, what you're discussing, what referrals. If there are any jobs, you know, maybe you have a different sheet that tracks the jobs that you've applied to so that you don't forget to go back and follow up. But you're going to want to track your activity. That will really help keep you organized, and a lot of people have appreciated that. Some people like to have a weekly schedule. You might decide, okay, on Mondays, I'm going to, you know, revise my resume. On Tuesday, I'm going to check out a cover letter. On Thursday, I'm going to send out 2 requests for informational interviews. On Thursday, I'm going to have one of those interviews. On Friday, I have a networking event I'm going to attend. But, you know, whatever your strategies are going to be, you might create a weekly schedule for yourself. That, again, will keep you motivated. So not only track activities, but also have a weekly schedule. I think is really helpful for people so they don't lose track of what they've done or where they've been. So I'd like you just to spend a little bit of time just outlining. You might have to tweak it a few times and see what works for you. There is no, you know, perfect solution for that. So think about some of those strategies that we've listed on the earlier slides and kind of go through here and see, okay, how might I organize this process? Because I'm sure some of you have already done a number of these things. So start to think about what makes sense to you. And we'll give you a couple minutes to do that. And then we'll have about 20 minutes to do some Q&A. So go ahead and do that. And I'll check back with you in a couple minutes, and hopefully that'll generate some more questions for you, and we can discuss those in the second part. Thanks. Okay, so I know that that's just getting you a start, and I know you didn't complete it, but I did just want to give you a little bit of time to think about it, and then maybe that'll generate some questions. Now I'm going to escape my my PowerPoint and come back to me, and then hopefully we'll see some Q&A on the side.
Linda, we did get some feedback that maybe a few people aren't able to access Q&A. So if you are having that trouble, I started a discussion in the LinkedIn group. Feel free to post questions there too.
Okay, great. All right, I'm going to just go ahead and read these, the 2 that I have here, and then if Courtney, if you want to help me with the LinkedIn ones, that would be great.
Absolutely, yep.
Okay. All right, so what typo on the first question? Oh, sorry, let me repeat. I have a question about branding. I'm learning CSS and HTML. Good for you. It would be very beneficial to create a website that explains who I am and what I have done. Would it be link the website to the LinkedIn? Yeah, I think if that's something that you have a skill set in and you want to showcase that by showing your website, I think that's fantastic. So yeah, good for you. And I would just include it in all of your materials and brand it up there so that they can click on that for more information. You can also include that in your LinkedIn profile as well. So, you know, you're kind of stuck with the LinkedIn look, but then if you want to bring that in, that's super. That's a great idea. And it demonstrates your skill set, which is even better. Do we have another question?
We don't have any others right now, but just a reminder to everyone, these can be questions about anything as far as the job search process is going. So far, we just kind of wanted to do a midway check-in. You can even update us with how things are going so far. Either you've had an interview or you haven't and you're frustrated. We'd love to hear how your search is going so far. So don't be shy. I know it can be a little awkward, but remember, we're embracing the awkward. So share any questions or feelings you're having so far.
Oh, we've got a question here. Okay. If you are interested in employment in an area where you aren't currently living, how would you recommend searching and applying to jobs there? Like you said, replying to postings isn't great, but what else is there? Regular mail, phone call? Yeah, that's a really good point. So again, this is where I would try to use LinkedIn and see, you're going to learn a little bit about this on Thursday, but my preference would be for you to try to make some contacts in that area, finding them either alumni or referrals, or telling your network, I'm moving to Denver, do you know anybody there? And start trying to connect and do Skype, do Google Hangouts, start trying to meet them virtually first and see what recommendations they have. And then if you start to create a few of those initial contacts, then I recommend planning a trip if you can for like a 1 week period of time in enough far advance that you can kind of cluster those meetings. And I think then you could try to meet with them, because it is kind of the same process. And I do hear that a lot of times people will say, well, if there's someone applying for the job that's local versus someone that's far away, a lot of times they go, that just feels easier to them. So try to start making those connections virtually first, just like a regular informational interview, but do it in those markets. And again, the great thing is the U of O Alumni Association has chapters in so many major cities. Plus you can just Google, or excuse me, LinkedIn in the advanced search plugin, University of Oregon and the city, and you'd be amazed at how many contacts you might find. Okay. Okay, I've been experimenting with the 30-second spot or elevator pitch. It seems that when people find out I just graduated, it is easy to start the pitch. Sorry, it moved up on me. Yet it feels that other people are really uninterested. How do you determine the best time in person? So that's a good question. So I don't always think you lead with that if they're, you know, with the pitch, because again, it's about building relationships first. But if somebody asks you, what are you doing? I would be specific about what you're doing and what you're looking for. Because if they're asking, they want to know. But I think sometimes the better way is to ask them. If you get the opportunity to ask them first, be curious about them, ask them follow-up questions, and then they'll naturally ask you. So don't be ready just to respond immediately with a 30-second pitch, only if they're really asking for that. And then they can ask for more information. Did I answer that well? Let's see. Do you have anything else to add to that, Courtney? I'm just looking.
No, Beth, I'm not positive that I'm reading the question completely how you were hoping. For me, I remember when I graduated both from undergraduate and graduate school, I thought that that was the easiest way to approach was, you know, I just graduated and yada, yada, yada. And so one of my biggest fears has been job searching after that kind of graduation point and having to actually come up with, again, what my my memorable pieces or what differentiates me beyond that graduation piece. So I think if I'm reading your question correctly, you're saying that it seems easy to start it with I just graduated, but some people don't seem very interested in that. Is that? Feel free to clarify, Beth, if that's what you're.
That's a good point, Courtney, because that is a piece of feedback that I do give to people is, unless I was assuming that maybe they knew you just graduated, so they were saying, so now what are you doing? Mm-hmm. But if, so I always recommend not including that, especially if you've done some projects or you've worked, you can just say what you're interested in doing. So maybe you're volunteering right now, maybe you're in the middle of the job search process, but don't always lead with I just graduated, because you're right, that can be kind of a conversation dead end. What are some examples of using social media? I've seen current employees at companies tweet that they are looking to hire for certain position. What would a good response be? Ask for more info, describe why you want the job, or what? Oh, that's great. Yeah, a lot of them are tweeting. In fact, I worked with somebody that found out about a job just by, they saw it on Twitter and then they applied. So yeah, so give them some love right back. And then ask how you can follow up. And then on your own, I would go and look on their website and see if something's posted so that you can respond to it right away. But yeah, give them that love right away, because usually then they'll follow up and they'll take you offline and give you more information. But yeah, you want to say, oh, I've just been doing that similar work. This is exactly what I'm looking for. I would love to talk to you more about the opportunity. You don't want to say, I want that job, because you don't really know, but you'd like to learn more and you'd like to share your qualifications, and how do we go about that? Courtney, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I think great answer, Linda, and great question, Michael. I was just, I forget that I'm never turning it on me. Sorry, Linda. I would say that even better if, Michael, if you have a solid place to send them to, if they do happen to seem interested and want to follow up on you specifically, like either your LinkedIn profile or a website, it's not always the case that they will take the time to do that just based off your comment. But I think having a solid place to lead them so that they don't just see your comment and they're like, that's great, Michael, but we don't know anything about you other than, you know, your Twitter name or whatever your profile says on Twitter. So I would say just be ready to have concrete things that they could, if they do want to find out more information about you, that they could link to those things. Again, you don't want to seem too pushy by including that necessarily in your comment. But if they do decide to follow up on you and do some more research on their own, that they would have a good solid place to go to. Maybe you include your LinkedIn profile URL in your Twitter profile or your website URL, something like that. So they have a good place to follow up.
Yeah, that's great. We have another question from Michael. Thank you for the questions. What would a proactive use of social media look like? Look up people in the industry and ask for advice. See if they have jobs, or just introduce yourself. So I always recommend that it's best not to just go, even though we all want a job, we don't really want to start that way. So I recommend sending sometimes you don't have as many in-mail messages that you'd like. So, but if you found somebody in LA that's a duck, you might just say, do an introduction and say, hey, I just saw that you're, at, well, let's see, you're at NBC, and you're in LA, and I really want to be in the entertainment. I'm trying to meet people in the entertainment industry, hoping that we could have a conversation either on phone or Skype. This is my background. So you want to keep it pretty short and sweet. But again, you want to say what you're attracted to about them and what value you feel like you bring to them as well. So that I primarily would see that on LinkedIn, but you also see it a lot on Twitter. That can happen. Maybe, Courtney, do you know more about doing that on Twitter? I see it more because LinkedIn is more professional, so I see it more on that.
Yeah, social media and job search is one of my favorite topics, so I'm digging these questions, Michael. I would say, we won't spend the whole time talking about this. I could do a whole host of workshops, but I would say, remember, definitely use it for connecting with people, as Linda was talking about, but also think about it as building your profile and your brand. So Twitter is a really good place for you to post about the articles you're reading, conversations you just had with people, cool things that are going on in your industry. It shows that you're really relevant. And so, of course, do the active connecting with people, but also build your brand on things like Twitter. Facebook is not as I'm sure you can imagine, is not as good for a job searching tool. What kind of the experts have said is that Facebook is a really good place for you to just put out to your network that you're job searching. So let your family and friends know, I'm looking in this region or in this field. Does anyone have any contacts? That's the best way as far as Facebook goes to start connecting with people. But Twitter and LinkedIn and Instagram, if you're in the creative world, or Pinterest, or whatever those platforms are that you want to use, are really good places to build your brand and show that you're really relevant in the industry you're going into.
And I just wanted to give a real life example. Some of you have been great about already reaching out and talking to me, wanting to connect with me on LinkedIn. And I gave this feedback in the LinkedIn group, and I'm just going to restate it here just because I've got a live audience, is the importance of always writing a short note. They limit you on your characters, but for instance, with me, it could be as simple as, "Hi, Linda, thanks for the talk on the job search process today. I look forward to the next session." It can be as simple as that. And because it shows me, okay, this is how we're connected, and this is why you want to stay connected. So Michael, if you're connecting with someone in another market, those are the things that you want to convey, is, you know, why you want to connect with that person. And if you have met, or if you read about them, I mean, sometimes I actually will reach out to people that I don't know. Most common is if I've just read about somebody in the Business Journal who I find out is a duck and is a CEO of an organization or doing something really cool. I'll send a LinkedIn message to them. I have no contacts with them, and I just say, "Hey, I just read this article in the Business Journal. I'm really excited to see what you're doing. If you're ever willing to talk to, you know, recent graduates about your work, I'd love to stay connected or possibly speak on one of my panels." They almost always accept my request because I just gave them a short reason to do it. They feel loyal to ducks. So I would use that kind of a similar tactic, and that's just for me to build my own professional connections, but you can do it as you're building your connections in the field as well.
Yeah, I would say a genuine flattery usually never goes the wrong way. So I've had good, it's similar to what Linda said. I reached out to someone that had written an article I really liked, and they immediately connected, and then we ended up meeting at a conference. So yeah, genuine flattery is a good thing.
Yeah, good. These are great questions, and some of these things hopefully will be covered in the networking session as well. Anything on LinkedIn, Courtney, that you see?
Nope, not yet. Have people had interviews since the group started, or how is your search going? And feel free to not make it a question necessarily, but just things that are going well or things you're struggling with. Sometimes we also forget that we do have about a 30-second delay. So if Linda and I are just staring at you, it's because you hear us all about a minute after we say that.
That's right. Thanks for the thumbs up, Beth. Has anybody created a system for themselves in tracking all of their activity, their job search activity, that maybe they have a tool that they like that they might want to share with the group? Some people use Google Docs, some people use Excel, some people, you know, don't have that technological capability and they like to just use tables. So again, it can be any kind of system. Maybe some of you are really fancy and can do pivots.
While we're waiting for questions, one thing I will just point you all to is we started a resource discussion on LinkedIn. So we're putting all of the resources. Linda and I have both referred several times that we're going to be putting additional resources after each session. And so know that is it might get kind of buried in the LinkedIn group as we go down. So I'll keep trying to move it up, but know that exists. And in the meantime, it looks like we have several comments or questions. So
great. So Linda has asked, would the same type of contact and research rules apply to looking at schools, since they are not companies, but each individual entity? Is there a good way to connect with them? Are you, Linda, can you clarify, are you talking about graduate school? Contact and research, or looking at jobs? What's that?
Looking to actually work at a school.
Okay.
And I can't remember if it's elementary or high school, Linda, if you want to clarify, but I believe you're trying to actually work in education.
So yeah, so a lot of people in education, I have to say, are not as great at LinkedIn. So so there's some people that are really good at doing that, like creative fields, marketing fields, business fields. But I would admit to the fact that it's not the perfect strategy for schools to just rely on LinkedIn. But again, I know it's the same approach though. So if you can get referrals to certain districts that you're interested in, to see if people might be your advocate. I worked with somebody that was trying to be a principal in Bend. And again, she was just working her contacts, just, you know, anybody in the La Pine Bend school district, and just put it out to her own personal network. And when she was in school, asking her professors, all of those. And so it's a little bit, it's not using social media as much as it is still making those contacts, because then they just put in a good word for you. Because again, everyone's trying to find the right fit for that person. Are they going to fit with our school? Do they have the right rapport? So those things can be important. Anything to add to that, Courtney?
No, I think that's great. Yeah, similar things. I don't think they're as well connected as other fields, but any way you can get involved in the community, if you have a specific community or school district you're looking to be a part of, I think that's always, that's a sure way to connect with people that might care about education or may be connected in the education world as well.
So Linda did clarify, and it says at this point, any type of education, but mainly higher ed. Well, I would say higher ed, they're getting a little bit better with LinkedIn than lower districts. So, so you can still probably use LinkedIn for those kinds of opportunities. I know some higher ed people aren't as active, like us career people are. So you might have to be a little bit more patient and maybe trying to find their exact email address, which a lot of times you can kind of find that on their websites by going in that search function and just sending them a direct email. So that still might be better. So thank you for clarifying that, Linda. Michael is sharing, he recently started a spreadsheet to keep track of jobs I've applied to and remember the company, date applied good, any responses received. I was noticing that I was having a hard time keeping things straight between jobs. I hope that's helped, because the other thing I wanted to mention that I forgot, but Michael's comments reminded me of it. Make sure you're creating, if you have a Gmail, I recommend having folders for each one of your companies that you're applying to. What gets tricky is, okay, which resume did I send in for that? Which cover letter did I send in for that? So it's really important to create a system for yourself that's intuitive to you so that you don't lose track of that. So yeah, Michael, I'm glad you're doing that, because that is really key. Clint, I have a question about branding. I am learning. We did that question. Okay.
Sorry, I'm just going to select it. Otherwise, it'll not move out.
Oh, okay. All right. So I think we're. Beth, can you discuss interview stories a little bit more? Well, we are. We have just 4 minutes left right now, but we are going to go in depth on that. But I will give you, as you're preparing, if you have some week to prepare. The way I like people to structure that experience is. I'm going to talk about creating a form called, you can use a method called SOAR or STAR. You've maybe heard of those different methods. I tend to lean towards the SOAR one, it doesn't matter. But the S stands for what was the situation. The O is the opportunity or the obstacle. The A is the action that you took, and the R is the result. That helps you make it very measurable and memorable by having the organization to that. You don't have to say it in that order, because sometimes that feels clunky. Maybe you start with the result because I helped to raise $50,000 for this nonprofit by putting together an event where 300 people participated. And this is how I went about that process. So maybe you start with the result, which maybe that's the bullet point on your resume or something. And then you tell the story about how you went about that. And those are the stories that I want you all to start thinking about, things that you've accomplished, your strengths, your skills, and then building stories around those so that you don't get too caught off guard with questions, that you don't wing it. I used to wing it. It's not a good idea. And that it'll help you with your confidence. You'll feel more prepared. And just a heads up on the interviewing. On Tuesday, I'll be leading that discussion. And then after some of my tips and helpful hints, we're going to have a recent grad, a 2011 grad, who's been a recruiter at a staffing agency, at a medical clinic, and is now a recruiter at Nike. So for such a young person, she's had 3 very unique experiences. And so hopefully having her perspective on that interviewing process will be really helpful to you from her perspective. As a young person, she actually went through the job search group when she graduated. and then has subsequently had those 3 jobs. So hopefully she'll give you some insight on that as well. But hopefully that'll give you a little bit of a nugget to start preparing those stories. Thanks. Another question. All of this info has been great, motivated for me. Yay, with an exclamation point. I had an interview last week and 2 follow-up phone calls in the last few days. I feel like I don't have directly relevant stories for interviews. How general can stories be? Well, I mean, you don't, I'm trying to read through the lines on your question, so forgive me if I don't get it accurately. It doesn't have to specifically match, but maybe it reminds you of something. So a little trick of a phrase might be, I don't have a specific example. My example is not specific to that, but it reminds me of this experience that I had. And then maybe share a different experience that has some relevance, but doesn't feel as tied, if that's what you're looking for. You still want to try to be as specific. You don't want to say, I have great public speaking skills without sharing an example of how you spoke to a group, whether it was a group as small as 10 or as large as 100. So you still want to look for some nugget that's going to be relevant. The general ones are going to be fine. They might not be as memorable. If you sprinkle maybe 1 or 2 of those because you don't have specific examples, that's okay. Clearly you're doing something right if that did happen to you. So they're seeing enough that they like in you, that you're making that kind of progress. So congratulations. That must feel really, really good.
All right, so I think we're about wrapping up. I'm just going to say congrats, Sam. That's awesome. And one thing is don't sell yourself short. So I often use Linda's approach too. I'll say, I haven't had that exact that exact thing happen to me, but here's how, I've handled related experiences. But sometimes I think we might do that too often. So if they ask about, something that's related to communication skills and you don't think you've had that exact experience, but you know that you've used those skills in another setting, don't always feel like you need to qualify that it wasn't the exact same thing. Just a heads up, because I think sometimes you can run into the point when an interview when you're saying, I haven't had that exact experience, I haven't had that specific thing, and then you start to kind of sell yourself short when you actually do have the skills that they're looking for.
That's a good point. And if you're working on them, you can share that too. I mean, don't be afraid to say, that's a really good question, and that's something that I've been working on, and these are the steps that I've taken to improve, that experience for myself. And that impresses them too. It shows a lot of self-awareness.